Welcome to FilmFlix Movie Recap. In this recap, we're going to be reviewing the movie, The Great Gatsby. The movie commences with a view of a flashing green light in East Egg, Long Island, as Nick Carraway narrates how his father advised him to always see the good in people. Next, Nick is seen talking to a doctor in the Perkins Sanitarium, where his records indicate that Nick is there due to his struggle with alcoholism and other issues. Nick discloses that Gatsby is the only person he has ever seen as genuinely good. The story then shifts back to the spring of 1922, when Wall Street was flourishing, and bootlegging was thriving due to the ban on alcohol. Nick moves to a cottage on Long Island in West Egg, explaining that he was ambitious and started working as a bond broker for Wall Street, even though he originally aspired to be a writer. His cottage is situated next to Gatsby's mansion. Nick goes to visit his cousin Daisy and her husband Tom Buchanan, who attended Yale with Nick. During dinner, Tom demonstrates his arrogance and racism by commenting on the ascent of the colored empire. Jordan Baker, a golfer, is introduced to Nick by Daisy. Later, Nick takes a walk with Daisy, who reveals that she has grown cynical lately. She also discloses that she is glad to have had a daughter, and hopes she can be a fool, because that is the best thing a girl can be in this world. On his way home, Nick sees Gatsby standing on the pier, reaching towards the green light. The doctor at the sanitarium encourages Nick to write a novel about his experience. He then recounts the story of the Valley of Ashes, a barren part of New York, with a billboard featuring the Eyes of Eckelberg. Nick and Tom stop at a car repair garage run by George Wilson, where it becomes apparent that Myrtle is Tom's mistress. Myrtle mentions that she wants to introduce her sister to Nick when she visits New York. At a party, Nick observes Myrtle's sister and her friends celebrating, and he finds himself drunk for the second time in his life. As he watches the people in the town from his window, he realizes that he is within and without the world he is in. Tom gets furious when Myrtle calls Daisy's name, causing him to hit her hard, across the face. Nick wakes up in his home, with no recollection of how he got there. He receives an invitation to a party at Gatsby's, and he attends the extravagant event. However, he cannot find Gatsby until he finally runs into him. Jay Gatsby is not what Nick imagined him to be. Jordan tells Nick that Gatsby wants to speak with her in private, and when she returns, she reveals that she heard something shocking. Before she can say anything else, she is whisked away by a wealthy man. The next day, Gatsby arrives at Nick's cottage in his Duesenberg and takes him on a trip, revealing to him God's truth about himself. He tells Nick that he hails from a wealthy family, all of whom have passed away, and that he attended Oxford, and was a highly decorated World War I veteran. Gatsby takes Nick to meet his business partner, Meyer Wolfsheim, in a speakeasy where bootlegged alcohol is sold. We learn that Wolfsheim is rumored to have fixed the 1919 World Series, and Gatsby considers partnering with him. However, when Tom Buchanan shows up, Gatsby disappears. Later, Jordan tells Nick about her conversation with Gatsby, and reveals, through a flashback, that Gatsby and Daisy were once romantically involved, when he was a war officer in Louisville, Kentucky. Daisy eventually married Tom Buchanan, but Gatsby bought a mansion across from her home, to be near her. Jordan informs Nick that Gatsby wants him to invite Daisy over for tea. Nick agrees, and Gatsby arranges for the tea to take place at his own home. When Daisy arrives, Gatsby becomes nervous, and almost leaves before coming back in, soaking wet from the rain. The two are overjoyed to see each other again, and they spend time together at Gatsby's place and at the beach. However, when Daisy sees Gatsby's collection of shirts, she becomes emotional and starts crying. Nick reveals the truth about Gatsby's background, including the fact that his real name is James Gatz, and he came from a poor family of farmers in North Dakota. After rescuing a man named Dan Cody while sailing, Gatsby adopted some of Cody's customs, including the phrase "old sport," which he often uses when addressing Nick. Despite not inheriting Cody's fortune, due to the family's interference, Gatsby went on to become wealthy. At another party thrown by Gatsby, he manages to get Daisy and Tom to attend. He and Daisy sneak away to a nearby location, and passionately kiss. Daisy confesses that she wishes they could leave together. Gatsby is interrupted by his butler, who pulls him away to handle a business dispute. After the party, Gatsby thinks that Daisy did not enjoy herself, and insists that she tell Tom she no longer loves him, so they can be together. Nick warns him that he cannot repeat the past, but Gatsby is determined to do so. He tells Nick about the first time he kissed Daisy, and how he felt like he had already married her. Gatsby leaves, telling Nick he is wrong about the past. Gatsby stops hosting parties for some time. One day, during the hottest day of summer, he invites Nick, Daisy, Tom, and Jordan over for lunch. Gatsby tries to hold Daisy's hand, but she becomes anxious and claims to be bored, suggesting they go into the city. Tom notices Daisy's attraction to Gatsby, and agrees to go into the city with Nick and Jordan. Gatsby and Daisy drive away in his car, while Tom takes the other two. At a garage, George Wilson tells Tom about Myrtle's infidelity, but not that she is involved with Tom. At a hotel, they meet up, and are served a large block of ice for drinks, due to the heat. Tom starts to provoke Gatsby, insulting him for his use of Old Sport and accusing him of being a bootlegger with Wolfsheim. Gatsby retaliates by saying Daisy loves him and not Tom, putting her in an awkward position. As Tom continues to provoke Gatsby, he loses his temper, throwing alcohol and nearly hitting Tom. This scares Daisy and Jordan, and they leave with Gatsby. Tom decides to open a bottle of liquor and offers Nick some, mentioning that it is his birthday. Myrtle is being abused by George at night, as he interrogates her about where she got her pearls. She runs out onto the street, thinking Tom is approaching in his Duesenberg. The car is actually driven by Gatsby, who tries to swerve to avoid her, but strikes and kills her instantly. Tom, Jordan, and Nick drive by the scene, discover Myrtle's corpse, and encounter the police. Tom denies knowing Myrtle well, but is visibly upset. He goes to George, who is mourning, and informs him that Gatsby was driving the car that hit Myrtle. Afterward, the Buchanans return home, and Jordan invites Nick inside, but he declines. Gatsby calls out to him as he leaves, and confesses that Daisy was driving the car after they left the city, but they were unable to avoid hitting Myrtle. Nick sees Tom and Daisy speaking, apparently having reconciled. Later, Nick meets Gatsby, who is fixing up his car and covering it. Gatsby reveals his true feelings for Daisy, how he hoped she would wait for him after he returned from the war, but she had already married Tom. Nick realizes that Gatsby genuinely loved Daisy, and only threw the parties in the hopes that she would attend one. Gatsby decides to take a swim in his pool before the gardener drains it. Nick declines the invitation and departs, but not before telling Gatsby that he is worth more than the Buchanans. They wave to each other before parting. While at work, Nick is preoccupied with thoughts of Gatsby, and hopes to receive some good news from him. Meanwhile, Daisy is also contemplating calling Gatsby, and is seen looking at her phone. Gatsby's phone rings, and he eagerly answers, unaware that George Wilson is standing behind him with a gun. George shoots Gatsby in the back, causing him to fall into his pool, dead. George then turns the gun on himself. It is revealed that the call was from Nick, who hears the gunshots and panics. Following Gatsby's death, the media falsely accuses him of having an affair with Myrtle, and being responsible for her death. Nick is frustrated that he cannot set the record straight. Reporters swarm his house, disrespectfully hovering over Gatsby's open casket. Nick attempts to reach out to Daisy, but she and Tom have already left with their daughter, and instructed their butler to inform Nick. Only Nick attends Gatsby's funeral, and he becomes completely disillusioned with New York, eventually leaving for the Midwest. He reflects that Gatsby could not see that his dream of being with Daisy was out of reach. Nick finishes writing his book, which he simply titles Gatsby. However, he later adds a subtitle, calling it The Great Gatsby. And that's all for this recap. See you in the next one.